Welcome to today's JTB Business Travel Fireside Chat on business travel sustainability for SMEs. As we know, sustainability is a key topic in our travel industry. We see global demand for business travel on the rise again. Finally, we're all glad about that, but now more than ever, we need innovative solutions that are accessible, practical, and effective also for SMEs. So today we'll get some great insights in how we can collectively reshape travel, who can and will drive change, and we'll learn about opportunities and obstacles for SMEs to adjust travel programs to include sustainable practices while controlling cost. So I'm very excited that today I'm joined by two inspiring travel industry leaders, Gerry Tenebruso, Global Sales Manager, Sustainability at Delta Airlines, and Steve Newton, Head of Sales at Tripkicks. Welcome. And Gerry, to start with you, you've been with Delta Airlines since 2017. Congrats on your 5 years. And you now lead the sustainability consulting team. Can you share a little bit about your role and maybe what an average day looks like for you?
Yeah, good morning. And good morning, everybody on the line, or good afternoon, depending on where you're coming in from. And 5 years went pretty quick. And we get through the pandemic. That took a couple of years. And we find ourselves now in kind of post-pandemic world. Travel's coming back, really exciting, and I find myself in the sustainability team. And it's really gotten over the last year and a half that I've joined this team, this vertical, a lot more sophisticated, and for the better. The questions have gotten tougher, the interest has gone higher, and I really attribute that to the team, corporate customers, everybody just leaning into the topic. So it's been 18 months on the team. We have 1,500 corporate customers that are clamoring for information. We're up to conversation, I think, number 600. There's a team of 4 of us that are out there talking, not just domestically, U.S. point of sale, really globally, which is really heartening to see at different levels of interest. But we're really starting to see that this is not a U.S. movement, that it's a global movement, which is really, really great. So I'm very excited to be here. Happy to answer any questions and looking forward to the convo.
Well, I do have a question for you. I'm hearing that you're from a line of hazelnut farmers.
I am, yes.
How does that connect with sustainability?
Growing up, my mom shipped me off to Italy. My parents are from Italy, and we had hazelnut farms as a kid, and hopefully everybody loved maybe something that was in your cupboard, Nutella. Yeah. So we would sell our hazelnuts to the Nutella people, and that's our claim to fame. So yeah, when you grow up on a farm or get introduced to that, I think as a kid, number one, you connect with your food, but number two, being farmers, I think generally are just very frugal. Frugal people, they do make do with whatever they have around. And I think that just being in nature and dealing with agriculture, you try to waste as little as possible. So that kind of like stuck with me and ingrained with me. It kind of full circle here with this role.
Great, good. Moving to you, Steve. Yep. You've been with Tripkicks over 3 years and leading the sales team.
That's right.
I actually learned something interesting about you too, that you're an expert on preparing scrambled eggs. And I was just wondering, are there any similarities between preparing breakfast, a good breakfast, and your work in partnering with travel managers around the world to make true business travel better?
I'm happy to hear that my expertise is spreading. That's a good thing. Good morning, everybody, too. Happy to be with everyone on the call today. Let me ask you, Gerry, when you make your scrambled eggs, how long does it take you to make them?
Well, I'll be honest, I never make my own scrambled eggs.
The problem is with most people is it's too quick. You got to be low and slow, low heat, and take a little bit of time. You know, it's kind of like a risotto. You always want to keep it stirring, and if I'm going to make the connection, maybe it's patience. You know, maybe it's kind of waiting out for the results that we need, and let's not get too excited and expect huge results tomorrow, but low and slow.
Great. That's maybe a great segue into the topic for the day, sustainability. No, maybe that's going to require patience too. So yeah. I'm very excited to talk to you about that today, helping our SMEs to figure out little steps, practical things that maybe work for them. Gerry, starting with you, in your role, what kind of things that are happening are you most passionate about that you see that we're achieving?
I think it all starts with probably the most important thing before you start seeing results to the point of patience. It's that education piece. It's can you even define sustainability for yourselves, for your organization? That's where it really starts. For me, sustainability means making conscious choices of what's going on my plate, where are my eggs coming from, what flight am I taking, what hotel am I staying at. You can actually start making conscious choices in the marketplace. So, even though I fly Delta, I really do look at what car am I driving, how often am I driving, what hotels, are they LEED certified, everything along those lines. We always ask, what can your organization do for you, but what can you do for your organization? What can you do for yourself as an SME, as an individual person? It's just being aware of your individual choices on a daily basis. That to me is sustainability. If you can just raise awareness for yourself, that really means a lot. And then that leads into your work. And for Delta, taking that mentality into that education piece. What are the solutions out there that corporations, SME, Fortune 500, doesn't matter, can take advantage of? Are there opportunities in offsets? Can I offset my flight? Can I buy into sustainable aviation fuels that we can and get the environmental attributes that we can talk about in a little bit? Can I simply put the window shade down? Can I bring my own water bottle? Can I open the vents at the gate, on the plane at the gate to help cool the aircraft? There's these little things that you can do as a person, but also at a larger scale as an organization. That's our job. Our 4 people at Delta is to be consultants, is to be the trusted consultant, both on the corporate and the agency side.
Conscious choices that start with awareness about the little things that can go a long way. Yeah. How about you, Steve? Any sustainable measures that you're excited about?
Yeah, for us, passion, I guess as it relates to Tripkicks and what we're pursuing, but we see it weekly. We're talking to companies that are clients and prospects all over the world, and we do a lot of chatting about what's important to them. We do a lot of listening around, what initiatives, what key priorities do they have that they're trying to achieve, and maybe the most common. Likely the most common is all centered around sustainability, right? And so what I'm passionate about, what I think our team is doing a really great job at, is helping companies be able to start to move the needle as it relates to the initiatives that they have around sustainability in their program, right? It kind of looks a little different from one company to another. Certainly SMEs and Fortune 500s, two different environments for a lot of reasons. But in terms of like the little decisions that travelers make, you mentioned choices earlier, right? If we can start to influence those so that they're better and they're more in line with those initiatives that the company has, we can start to bring about pretty big results, right? So really passionate about that, really passionate about how those simple little things can go a long way.
Do you feel, you said moving the needle, do you feel things have for sure changed since the pandemic? You really see we are making progress? Or
I think one of the things we've noticed during the pandemic is that people are more interested than ever about the effects and the ramifications of their travel decisions, right? It's kind of allowed them to pause and focus on understanding what's the impact of booking a flight or staying at a hotel. I think there's a big focus on certainly trying to quantify that and be able to track it, but really what we're interested in is being able to influence those decisions before they're even made, so that they're in line with what the program's trying to accomplish, right?
Do you also think that we're really moving to a global landscape where more people, more companies are making green travel choices?
They are, and I think it's really up to us on the travel side to try to help make that change seamless. And also one point that I want to make, regardless of the size of the company, agnostic on size, the number one thing any company can do is just understand the data. Where's their data coming from? What is their footprint? If there's one takeaway today, is understanding what your footprint is. And then that's the baseline of then trying to make a change. Can I change my travel policy? Can I travel better? Meaning, can I go to London once instead of 3 times and pick the right hotels and pick the right airline with the right aircraft? And understanding your footprint is a number one priority. And who do you lean on for that? Is it your agency? Is your airline partner? Maybe it's a mix of both to understand what that footprint actually is.
Got it. Great. I'm just curious, we have a little poll to see what our audience today thinks about their companies and having sustainable goals. So our first poll poll is really about, does your company have those goals? We know that the Fortune 500, they're really ahead. They have people, money, programs maybe to do it, but many smaller companies may not yet have those goals yet.
Sure.
As I'm listening to you, can do little things, and it's starting with awareness, starting having the right information at the time maybe of booking when you can make those choices. So I'm interested to see what the outcome of this poll is, to see where companies are, and we see that it's sort of even, right?
Oh, wow.
Half, little part doesn't know, but companies that have goals and no goals are even. So there's still definitely progress to be made here, maybe for many of our SMEs that are listening in today.
Yeah. And just to jump in, I bet you if we took this poll a year ago, that green bar would have been a lot higher than that yes bar. And that's just a really good sign that even at the SME level, even with not being a Fortune 50, 500, whatever the case might be, sustainability is starting to become top of mind regardless of the size of the company.
Cool. So Gerry, looking at this, right, we know that the larger enterprises are maybe driving some of this, but what do you think, who should really be the ones, or who are the ones driving? Should it be the travelers that push more? Is it governments? Is it the large corporations?
So very matrix question. Yeah, it's a little bit of everybody. This is where I think consumerism flows into the answer, where we're also seeing at Delta is high value customers, leisure customers, business travelers are all changing their consumerism, meaning the products that they want to buy, the services they want to be serviced by, the airline that they fly, they want a sustainable element. And I think even demographically, I think the younger the customer is, the more they want sustainability ingrained in that product. So we're seeing a shift. I think that's where the individual consumer can put pressure on companies to change. It's also companies that are reacting, hopefully in a proactive way. They're not just waiting for their customers to tell them. On the Delta side, we're just, it's part of our culture now to just be more sustainable. So we're taking the lead on our end to reduce our carbon intensity. So we have our own goals. They're called science-based targets. For those that might be familiar on the call, a lot of companies are standing these up. And I keep going back in time to current time, is that I'm really enheartened again that back in 21, when we committed to science-based targets, there were so many companies that had their own science-based targets. Fast forward to right now, that number has probably doubled. So the awareness and the ability to set those targets has really gone up exponentially over time, and I really see that continuing on. So companies need to be aware of the changing landscape from a consumerism standpoint, what we're selling, but also a really interesting topic is the ability to maintain talent. So when people are recruiting talent or retention, people want to know that where they're working is actually doing something in a sustainable way, or their products are being made more sustainable, or they're proud of the company that they work at because they're doing something in the sustainability space. So that's something we're also seeing as well.
That could be something that also smaller companies can do, right?
For sure.
Even they may not have lofty big goals, but if they are able to show to potential talent that what they're doing, even the little things, they can be attractive to those. Steve, we know that SMEs initially drove the recovery after the pandemic, right? Everybody was seeing that they were more agile to travel and things like that. When it comes to sustainability, they may not have those same means as larger corporations, but what, from a Tripkicks perspective, do you see as opportunities for SMEs to sort of participate and play their role?
I think it's a great question, and it kind of goes into, Gerry, you're just saying, during COVID, they really kind of drove that recovery because of the unique scope of those companies, right? They're kind of quick to adapt new technologies. They're kind of crafty in approaching partnerships and relationships and supplier agreements maybe differently than like an enterprise level organization, right? If I'm an SME that doesn't currently have an agreement with Delta and I'm going to the table trying to strike a new deal, compare that to an enterprise organization that's had a long-standing legacy agreement, might be able to ask for some things or do it a little bit differently, right? And competitively, I think there's a huge advantage. When you talk about the workforce, The younger generations are occupying the majority of the workforce, and we know that these younger generations are very concerned about social initiatives, sustainability being really a leading one, right? So if as an SME, it's a little bit easier to align the vision of the company and maybe even the priorities of the travel program to that of the initiatives of our employees or our potential new employees or candidates, right? I think it becomes more attractive for them to join that company. So I think SMEs are in a pretty unique position there.
I would say they use their size as an asset. Just being more nimble, you can make decisions faster. You can acclimate to this changing landscape a lot faster. So just because you're small doesn't mean you're not mighty. You know, you can actually adhere to what's going on, and maybe to your point, be recruiting a better talent or change your travel policy to align to your cultural outlook or your current goals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. Going back a little higher level about sustainability, again, coming back to, we see the great driving force have been the larger enterprises. Does that could mean that maybe we're also focusing on a couple of easy things? Marketing is important for that,
Sure.
right? For their ESG goals. Do you see that maybe we do not have the right focus on what's important for sustainability? Maybe we're not talking about the more difficult parts of really more sustainable travel, like regulatory changes or larger scale staff utilization, carbon removal, instead of just talking about offsetting. What are your thoughts on that?
I have to say that it's a long pathway, is that we don't even know solutions that may be out there in 5 years. What we do know is that we can set short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. You know, we have to look at the future, look at future aircraft technologies, direct air carbon capture technologies. But what can we do right now? It has to be a number one priority, and that is what can we offset, but more importantly, what can we reduce? And that is the introduction of sustainable aviation fuel. And so we're on probably versions 1 and 2 and kind of 1.5 right now when it comes to different feedstocks, waste products, things with agricultural, biogenic feedstocks, and those kinds of things. And so every time we have a conversation, every time a corporation makes an investment, it signals to oil and gas companies that this is a profitable business and that they can hopefully transition over from making just Jet A fuel in their facilities to actually supporting SAF, because the more producers that get into the marketplace, it naturally brings the price down. So if that can be done, the adoption of SAF can be higher and lower the overall footprint. That's something we can do right now. SAF is something that can be invested in, that can be put on our planes right now. We don't have to buy special planes to use SAF. It's a drop-in solution. And we have to have something where it's not a silver bullet technology right now. We have to start slowing climate change, slowing our emission footprint in the current state. And then we can figure out the next better version of SAF, or maybe it's hydrogen planes. For instance, Delta signed an MOU with Airbus on hydrogen plane technology and doing research studies. We're working with MIT on doing discovery projects on contrails. Those are the clouds left behind by planes that can create some radiative forcing or heating of the Earth when they are left behind. So it's really around what can you do right now, keeping an eye on your midterm goals, SAF, carbon intensity reduction as an airline, but keeping an eye on long-term as well.
Yeah.
It's really a mix of all three.
Yeah, so SAF, and we'll circle back maybe a little bit to that because I'd love to hear more about
sure.
that. SAF is really something we can do now, while
Sure.
at the same time you're really working on, 5 years from now and 20, 30 years from now, what needs to be done.
And it's something that you don't have to be a Fortune 500 company to do. A lot of our SAF agreements, and we have over 40 of them, and JTV, thank you actually for being one of our SAF agreements. And this isn't just about corporations either, it's on the agency side as well. It's so important, is that everyone can do a SAF deal. Our SAF thresholds are as little as $5,000 to buy into it. And as long as we have the data, we can connect those environmental attributes to your footprint, and we can have an open conversation on what that really means to your organization. So we're really trying to lower the barriers around being able to do SAF deals with anyone. And I always come back to the data point. You can't change what you can't measure. And so it's really important to capture the data and understand it so you can get an honest and transparent view of your emission footprint.
Got it. You mentioned reduce, Steve. We know that travel does have a substantial environmental cost. within our industry, we're super happy that travel is back, that it may grow beyond what it was in 2019. But there are also voices that say, you know, should we really go back to that or not? What do you think? Should can actually more travel help us accelerate innovation, or do you think no, we should really focus on less travel?
I think you have to definitely acknowledge the fact that we want to do everything we can to minimize and remove wasteful travel, right? And that's something that organizations have focused on certainly during COVID, and we have to do that. And we have to understand also the effects and impacts of our travel decisions, and you know, having the data around that and being aware of our footprint, I think, is very productive. And in a lot of ways, we're a little behind in that, you know, compared to European companies. And right, we've got some work to do there. But you know, I think with volume, there's opportunity. I think with you know, more and more people flying and volumes increasing, it starts to create opportunities for airlines and manufacturers to better invest in their products. You know, I think today, if you look at the airline industry as a whole, it's 80% more efficient than it was in the 60s, right? So did that happen by reducing travel? No, it happened from demand and an increase in demand, right? And more people wanting and needing to fly. You know, old antiquated aircrafts were able to be replaced with new, more efficient technologies, and you know, we're seeing that with the 737-900ER that I know Delta's heavily involved with, right? So you know, by having demand and by having the desire for more and more people to travel, I think it creates opportunities around sustainability.
So more sustainable travel and bigger demand can actually go hand in hand.
Yeah,
that's insane. Actually may support each other. What do you think when there are increasingly choices out there or awareness? Who should be the one sort of to educate the traveler? Is that the companies? Is it the response of the travelers? I know that your company is an expert on sort of human behavior, guiding behavior. What can you tell us about the companies that struggle with how can I help my travelers make better choices?
For us, it's all about kind of back to the little decisions, right? Being able to provide information and insights that really help empower the traveler. I think, you know, training and education is certainly part of it. Travelers need to know the do's and the don'ts, what they can do, what they can't do. But beyond that, I think we need to empower them. We like that word, empower the travelers, really just on everything they need to know about their options so that they can choose what's best for them. They can understand why, you know, maybe a travel manager has selected a certain supplier as a most preferred option. It's a little bit of the carrot and the stick. So instead of just saying you should not do this or you should do this, we're going to say, here's all the reasons that justify why this is a part of our program. So for us, education, big part of it, but it's really just empowering them with the data that they need, the insights they need to make the best choices.
Do you agree, Gerry, that it's really the consumer, the traveler that can actually be the biggest force of change?
At the end of the day, they're the one clicking the button. And as long as it's within policy, it's up to them to decide who they'd like to go with. And it's up to the brands on the other side of that tool to do the right thing, meaning that what aircraft are they implementing? Is it 737 MAX 10s that we bought 100 of that we're going to start getting delivered, A321neos? So fleet renewals. Are they doing a SAF deal with that organization? Maybe it's a unique identifier that you know that you did a SAF deal with XYZ Corporation. Now it's on the tool and can be displayed. So different things need to happen, but it really is the person that's clicking the button that can make the decision. And those decisions then support the organizations that are really pushing the sustainability agenda.
So, but that would mean that it's really important to bring really choice to the traveler, right? So they have data about what kind of aircraft it is, things like that. So they can make a choice.
Transparency is key, and transparency in data is the #1 need. And so in knowing what your emission footprint from that specific flight come through the tool is something that we really need, and I think are really going to hone in on over the course of the next 12 to 18 months to get some kind of standardization around methodologies. Yeah. So there's different tools out there, such as Tripkicks, that can, you know, capture what your emission footprint would be. It's really up to the industry to get together from a coalition standpoint to say, we're all going to push in the same direction, and this is the methodology we're all going to follow for the sake of our travelers in our industry.
Got it. Yeah, I'm really interested when we talk about the choice, what actually our audience thinks of that, right? Do you think there are enough, our second poll, do you think there are enough sustainable travel options when it comes to flights, hotels, and rental cars? So do you already feel that when you book travel that you actually can make that intentional choice for less impactful travel? Again, because it can be great if your company has goals, but when you go to your tool and you can't really distinguish between your travel options, which one is better, then what's the point of those programs, right? So interested to see how people actually feel who are really out there when it comes to those choices. We see that a lot of people actually more than yes say that there's not yet those choices are not yet available enough.
I think you have to look at it holistically too, right? Like it's important to call out the flights that are more eco-friendly than others. We can do that with varying methodologies, lots of different things we can focus on, right? But let's say I'm flying from London to Paris. Are we letting travelers know that Eurostar is a great example there, a great option, right? There's a train that's maybe an hour longer commute time that maybe is more affordable, maybe it's a greener, definitely more sustainable mode of transportation. So looking at it holistically too, I think is a great way to kind of offer solutions there.
So, so do you feel that again, as airline, for instance, Gerry, you can give traveler options. So differentiating your product very specifically for, let's say, a New York, London flight or whatever, that you can target that as a more sustainable option or something compared to maybe your competitors. Do you feel that you can bring that data to the travelers in today's tools or not?
For sure. We can start identifying through our methodology, which is an IATA fuel burn methodology, on what that aircraft would burn on that specific route. And we're working with online booking tools and different distribution channels to be able to raise that transparency. So fleet is going to be really important in the future. From a SAF standpoint, SAF is a little bit more from a supply chain holistic standpoint. It's without getting too far into it, it's on the booking claim custody model. So it's impacting supply chains, not any one specific flight. So that's really important for the audience to know, because just to clarify that and not getting into any kind of greenwashing conversations and how SAF actually works right now. The caveat to that is the future. Is that even though we're currently on a booking claim custody model where it's impacting our supply chain, the goal is to actually have SAF in a localized method at specific airports. So your flight to London from JFK will hopefully one day actually have real SAF on it. We know the molecules are on there. And that's the real dream, and that's the real future, right? Where we don't have to think about it just, well, I pump SAF in somewhere at some shared facility. That's the goal, is to know that there's actually SAF on that flight. And it's everything we're doing right now in this coalition building with JTB and our other 40+ partners, that every time we do a deal in SAF, I'll keep harping on it, is that we get closer and closer to this localization model. We get closer and closer to oil and gas companies making SAF, or biofuel producers that are maybe in New York or at one of our hubs, maybe outside of Minnesota at NSP and things along those lines. That's the real goal. Yeah.
Because you started earlier in the conversation with awareness, having the right information, right?
Sure.
So when I book a flight, very often now there may be CO2 data in there, which is just A to B, and it would be the same for any airline. But we know for a fact that if you fly with a modern aircraft, it's 25% or more lower emissions when there's SAF. So it would be great to have that data right in that booking process, so you can differentiate, hey, if I would fly with a competitor of you, same direct flight, there can still be a difference.
I'm not asking people to go study every product from Boeing and Airbus, but just know enough to be dangerous. And on Delta, we definitely call out what's a flagship aircraft now and what's newer on our website. And it's really important to know, is this a newer aircraft that is actually going to get me there where I need to go more sustainably? And to your point, fleet renewal is huge, and knowing what aircraft are coming online. And on average, anytime you you bring a new aircraft online, albeit a Boeing or an Airbus 321 or a Boeing 737 MAX, it's about 20 to 25% more fuel efficient than anything that it's replacing, and that's definitely the case in our fleet. And it's just really understanding that. So pairing your emission data with knowing what kind of aircraft you're on, and also if you can get somewhere on a nonstop, the more landings and takeoffs that you do, have more fuel burn. So all of these little things can really make an impact as an individual. You're the person that's clicking that button. We'll get to that later, but pack lighter, that's something that you can really do, because more weight creates more fuel burn, more drag. So,
Steve, we know that we humans are, old habits die hard. So, we're so used to maybe booking flights based on lowest fare, things like that. How do we change behavior? Because it's great if we may have data, right? Ideally, we have really very reliable data in the booking process about what the actual fuel burn is and the impact. That doesn't necessarily change behavior yet, because we're so sort of ingrained to look at cost, for instance. How can we change that behavior?
I think, Gerry, you set me up perfectly here. And actually, a lot of what you were just saying sounds like part of our sales dialogue. So I don't know.
Maybe I borrowed it.
Yeah, no, it's good. I think so much of it is taking this data, right? Understanding what makes, let's say, this offering from Delta uniquely better, right, for different reasons, and making sure the traveler knows about it. Right? Let's say the travel manager has developed a SAF agreement with Delta. Let's just start there. How are we letting travelers know that that exists? And then how are we encouraging those travelers to choose Delta? Because we've invested in Delta and in SAF, right, as a company. It's one of the things our company does is we put that right in the booking tool, so we could see, hey, our company's made an investment, SAF investment with Delta. Choose it whenever you can, right? And then the more advanced kind of the next step in the future, understanding what routes will be predictably like running or flying with SAF. We can then identify those as well. So we could say, all right, out of all your options, for going from JFK to London, this one flies with SAF, and calling attention to that to a greater level of detail. So for us, around influencing behavior and encouraging travelers to choose things, it's about providing all the details that support why it's a best choice or a best decision for them, right? It's not by saying, okay, you can only do this, you can't do any of these. It's by offering options and being flexible. And again, back to empowerment. We're empowering them with the data so that they can make the best decisions. We think that empowered travelers are better travelers, right? So anything we can do to empower them, I think helps with influencing their decisions.
And technology helps with that. You're a technology company. Does your technology also make it more attainable for smaller companies, or do you think this is still something where, again, the larger companies have an advantage? Or
no, I think it's definitely both. I think there's certain information around our suppliers that really, regardless of how big your program is, it makes sense to communicate to travelers. Whether that's more sustainable options on the flight side or on the lodging side, being able to identify which properties are LEED certified or have other amenities or attributes that makes them more sustainable. It doesn't matter the size of your company, that information is available. We can present it through our product in the online booking tool. I think, for enterprise companies, they have maybe a little bit of a benefit in some ways when they just have so many more agreements with properties and chains and hotels, right? That they might have more data through the RFP process that could support why it's a most preferred option or a better option. But starting with the basics, which one's more sustainable, which one's more eco-friendly, doesn't matter the size of the organization.
Let's stay on that RFP piece as well. I mean, working with our sales colleagues, 2019, I very rarely saw a sustainability question come through an RFP. I have to be honest. And the sophistication from then till now, it almost seems like sustainability is almost 20% of the weight of an organization's decision on who they go with as a preferred partner. So it's very top of mind for us when it comes to making sure that we're making the changes needed, because this is also a business continuity issue. in order to stay in business, you need to be more sustainable.
And you were saying, Steve, that smaller companies that may not have those long-term contracts, they actually may have something to negotiate on, right? And trying to get those.
They've got the opportunity to kind of look at it differently and make requests. And Delta, equip me as a small business or as an SME with everything that I don't know about this. Leverage your larger accounts to help empower me in my decisions through the RFP process. I could easily be a part of that.
Sounds like another fireside chat.
Yes,
Right.
we'll come back to that. Great. Really exciting, right? A lot's happening, but we're realistic. There's also a lot of challenges. And Gerry, what do you consider to be sort of the top 3 challenges regarding travel sustainability, and any thoughts on how to address those challenges?
Awareness, just the education piece right now is just is the big piece. Just what are the solutions out there for corporations to take advantage of, and that's the starting point, is this education piece. Just raising awareness that then hopefully leads to a pathway of just enlightenment, because an organization has so many decisions to make on their end as well when it comes to travel policy. What do they want to do? Did they want to invest in SAF? Did I even know SAF existed? And so if this was April of 2021, not a lot of organizations knew that what SAF was. And I'm really happy to hear 18 months later now that we're 600 conversations in. And I can't even imagine where we're going to be 18 months from this point on. And so it's just that awareness piece is one. And 2 is solutions. So right now, this near-term, mid-term timeframe that we have would be, what are the solutions that we have in place? And it's that SAF solution right now. How can we have more SAF? The availability is really, really low. The more conversations that we have, that's why I always start with the education. The more companies that sign on, signal to the market. It's all about signaling to the market that we need more of this solution, because supplies are very, very limited, and they tend to go to the larger organizations. They tend to have these very specific goals that they need to buy environmental attributes towards. And so, really working from a research standpoint on what are the solutions of the future. And that's what Delta is really all about. Not just what can we offer our customers, but what are we doing in the background? And that's the offtake agreements that we're signing. We're bringing people to farms at one of our offtake partners at Givo, getting people to put on their boots and go out to a cornfield and learn how SAF goes from farm to fuel. It's that piece, literally, from the start of it, and how this SAF is made. So that education piece, signing more offtake agreements, signaling to the market that we are actually buying as much SAF as possible to achieve our own goals, which is a 10% SAF mix, if we're talking specifics, a 10% SAF mix by 2030 in our fuel supply chain. So it's really that education piece, and also working towards the future. That's a challenge, but in challenges, I see opportunities. And I think everybody on the line can also kind of start seeing that. Hopefully they start framing sustainability as an opportunity for your businesses. And I think this is a huge opportunity to brand your organizations in a more sustainable way. Just like you came out of the pandemic, SMEs were the first out of the gate, going out there. The sales teams, I never saw them so more aggressive, while large organizations are really dealing with travel policies and LOAs and do we send our people out. SMEs got out there fast and furious, and hopefully they actually gained some market share from that. I don't see sustainability as anything different. It's another opportunity to do exactly the same.
Great. And when you think about awareness, metrics, what do you think are the most important metrics that we should focus on that can help us see where we have created awareness, we want to move the needle, but then I want to see actually making a difference? We're
a bit metric agnostic at Delta, so we're looking at all metrics. We're really considering everything. But if we really had to boil things down to a couple, it's carbon intensity, because we have a very specific midterm carbon intensity goal, and that's based on revenue ton per kilometer. So for every piece of revenue that we get, both on the cargo and the passenger side, we're comparing that to how many kilometers we fly, and that helps us identify what our carbon intensity is. And that specific goal is a 45% reduction by 2035. So it's a pretty aggressive goal. It's a science-based related goal. That's why the data is so important, because then we can track against that. Our partners and our supply chain is very much a part of that. It just doesn't happen just with the SAF and the fuel. It also is the research projects with the MIT and the contrails. It's also with Boeing and Airbus with these fleet renewals. Our average age of aircraft has come down several years since the pandemic with the retirements of a lot of these aircraft. That's one element of it. You know, another thing is the ground equipment. Not a lot of folks know that it's actually captured in our ESG report, but we have very specific ground equipment renewal goals as well. It's just not about the aircraft. We have a lot of ground equipment. We want 50% of that to be electrified by 2025. So you can see where the metrics are, you know, we want to be agnostics because the metrics constantly change over time. You know, we want to be as flexible enough to utilize the best metrics as possible. If you had to just pick one, it's really around how do you quantify your carbon intensity? And right now, the best that we have is the revenue per kilometer per ton.
In order to reach those goals for you as an airline, that's a joint effort, right? So
sure.
There's many different stakeholders involved. What is your experience on how you actually collaborate that?
Very collaborative matrix dance. It's a dance and it takes a lot of players and it takes a lot of conversations, and it also takes a supply chain that might not quite be ready with certain products. And so if you go out with, you know, SAF is just one piece of this. Yes, it's the vast majority of our carbon footprint. And for those folks on the line, for any airline, it's in the high 90s. 98% of our carbon footprint comes from fuel. But that doesn't mean the other 2% are not important. So how do you deal with all the single-use plastics? How do you deal with all the bedding in Delta One? You know, or also can you introduce carbon-friendly food options as well? So our supply chain team is extremely hard at work and trying to source all of that for maybe even solutions that might not be out there. Even giving the small players, SMEs, this is where technology and startups thrive. It's because they're coming up with these solutions in this marketplace that can win, that maybe these large organizations are not thinking about yet. And so we're really looking at, in the startup space, a lot of these different products that can help us decarbonize. So we're really, really excited about that. Also, last piece is the transparency on it. Signing up for platforms like EcoVadis, where we can actually put a scorecard up on how we're doing. So to keep us honest on how we're doing over time is really important to us.
Yeah. Very exciting to hear a lot of things happening. Maybe someone in the audience is actually somewhere in that supply chain,
know.
Right? I'm excited to hear like it's more than the fuel, even though that maybe 90%. Being what kind of food you eat on a plane, that there's actually choice there. Those are exciting things that.
Yeah, and you know what? One point I definitely want to make is that sustainability. I know we're talking about sustainability, but sustainability and DE&I are not mutually exclusive. So there's a big piece there, is that a lot of these startups, a lot of these companies that we're now buying from are either African-American owned or women owned, and we're really driving that conversation as well at the exact same time. For instance, our Delta One amenity kit is made by someone somewhere. And so you have 250 women and parts of five locations within Mexico and these really poor areas that we've given jobs to, and they're actually hand making a lot of our amenity kits, and that we have products loaded into those amenity kits. So that's an opportunity where it's just not sustainable, but it's also the right thing to do and giving people an opportunity.
Awesome.
So
and that's just cool. A whole different fireside chat to talk about DE&I, right?
For sure.
As you said, they're not mutually exclusive. I'm just interested to hear from the audience again, right? We're moving to a landscape where maybe we see the needle being shifted from just thinking about cost to the impact on sustainability. So which factor is more important when booking travel for you? Is it still cost? Is it time, convenience, or is it actually is sustainability becoming one of your most important priorities when booking travel? You know, because if we're really serious about it, we know it may come even at an extra cost, but if we're serious about it, then we need to prioritize different things than what we've done maybe in the past couple of decades, where it was mostly focused on cost, maybe on time and convenience. We would accept a higher cost if we could have a direct flight or a higher class, but how about sustainability as a new thing? And we definitely see that the needle shifting because we see more already on sustainability. Time and convenience is still actually the #1 here in the poll, but we already see roughly 1/3 saying that sustainability is a driving thing, which is probably a year or 2 years ago was definitely different, right?
It probably wouldn't have been on the radar, and costs would have been one, and and strength of schedule would have been 2. And so you start seeing this change in the landscape. It's pretty incredible.
We already talked briefly about that, but Steve, it's really also that we see different generation coming into the workforce that does make different choices.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we know that all generations want to travel, and we know the data shows that all generations want to travel more. But yeah, millennials and Gen Zers are a little unique in that they're a little bit more focused on certain social initiatives like sustainability. That they're actually more likely to decline traveling if they think that they can't travel sustainably. They're more likely, millennials and Gen Z, to decline travel if they think or they view it as wasteful, right? And these generations, you know, millennials have been the majority of the workforce since 2016. Right? Millennials, Gen Z make up the majority today. I think in 2025, like 75% of the workforce is going to be millennials, right? So we're kind of the change agents with this, right? And I think it's really tied to our own personal social initiatives, right? Making sure that our work that we do aligns with kind of our personal, what's important to us and what drives us. But it's also that we're the majority of the workforce, right? The most people booking travel for business are those generations. So yeah, definitely impactful.
And very hopeful, right? That will bring an extra fuel to change. That generation is probably also, you know, maybe more critical about just talking about offsetting, right? You know, that's a big thing. And you mentioned it too, Gerry, that you're providing maybe tools or solutions for your corporate customers to offset some of their carbon footprint. Do you think we are, or we should sooner than later move to really removal instead of just offsetting with the carbon footprint?
I think we have to do everything. I think there's just literally a place for everything, because when you're talking about offsets, you're also talking about deforestation and forestry protection, which accounts for about 20% of the emission footprint. And so that's one thing. But we are starting to see a concrete shift away from offsets into more of a reduction or reductive type of solution, but then also a removal. Removal is not quite there yet, even from a scalability standpoint, being able to offer it to our customers. But our goal is to offer somewhat of a sustainability menu in the future. It is really depending on the culture of the company that they can do a host of things in the sustainability space when it comes to an environmental attribute from their, you know, their footprint from travel with Delta. And obviously they can also pair that with whatever they're doing on their end from an organization standpoint, because you know, travel just is one piece of their footprint. They have a whole organization to think about. But from a cultural standpoint and also just a time frame standpoint, Delta is definitely taking a look at those future technologies, not only in just aircraft, but what do we do with offsets in the future? As of March 20 to March 2022, we were a completely carbon neutral organization from a fuel burn standpoint. That's slowly changing because we're changing our mentality that maybe we can do more from just being reactive from an offset standpoint, but doing more in the SAF space, doing more in the research space. And that's our focus, is pushing more towards that medium term and that future term solution. Yeah.
I hear you say SAF a lot.
Yeah.
Can you enlighten us a little bit more, right?
For sure.
Sustainable air fuel, lower emissions, but I think a lot of those emissions have to do with the production process. Can you share a little bit more about, as an expert?
No, yeah, SAF is short for Sustainable Aviation Fuel or Sustainable Air Fuel. And it's probably the best pathway to decarbonize the aviation industry right now, outside of any other future technologies that happen. And to boil it down, making fuel out of agricultural product or waste products is a lot less carbon intensive than pulling oil out of the ground. Because it's also, we talk about circular economies, SAF is also circular. So when you burn SAF, it's still creating carbon, but in theory, it's being absorbed by agriculture that then turns again into the fuel. And so that's why we really love to bring people out. A plug for GEVO here, it's come out to a SAF fuel tour in Laverne, Minnesota, is that we literally ask people to come with us and learn about the farm to fuel movement, which is literally they're taking a waste product in corn, which is the carbohydrate, and creating ethanol, and carbs in corn create gassy cows. So we're solving two things at once, right? We're creating the ethanol that then is required to then make sustainable aviation fuel, and also reducing methane gas. And methane gas is in that other 2% outside of that 98% of jet fuel carbon that we emit. So we're really looking at things from a real holistic standpoint.
I know that production capacity is an issue with SAF.
Yeah.
I've read that you guys have signed a new agreement recently for, I think, 55 million gallons of SAF per year. Those are numbers that are, sort of beyond our comprehension what that means.
Sure. Yeah.
How could you
I'll give you
explain
more.
that to about what that is?
To kind of start giving you facts and figures, Delta has a 10% SAF goal by 2030. That means we want 10% of our fuel, neat SAF, to be mixed with our Jet A fuel. So SAF can be mixed with Jet A fuel up to 50%, and then you could put that on existing aircraft right now. There are aircraft out there right now that are in this latest turn of newest aircraft that can actually accept, and there's feasibility studies up to 100%, right? So when you make SAF, the life cycle analysis of SAF can create a product that is on average 75 to 80% less carbon intensive than jet fuel. And right now, you can probably run Delta's operation for 2 days with all the SAF that's made in the world. That's why coalition buildings, this fireside chat, SAF agreements is so important, because it signals that organizations are really interested in this right now. To give you a little bit further numbers, Delta in 2019 was about 4.6 billion gallons of conventional jet fuel. 10% of that, we want around 400 to 500 million gallons of SAF. And I'm happy to report we're about 35% of the way there with offtake agreements, and the ability to hold on to or sign agreements for future supply starting in around 2026, 27. So you have the Gevos, Amatis, DB Fuels. We're working with Neste, and so on and so forth. Northwest Advanced Biofuels that makes SAF out of woody biostock, so like woody pulp and things along those lines. So you'd be surprised what you can actually make SAF out of. And that's also the other thing, is that research piece. Can you make SAF out of things that normally you wouldn't have thought of? So municipal waste and things along those lines. Can you actually recapture carbon out of the atmosphere and make fuel again? And so the future is, is only as bright as you want to make it. We have to be optimistic that we can decarbonize.
Those are really some exciting things to
Really
think about, right? If we could get the carbon from the air to make new fuel, that would be exciting. Any other new innovations that you see or would love to see happening at the horizon?
I would love to see different fuels be introduced. So what can we do in the hydrogen space? What can we do in the electric space? I think electric aircrafts have a place. When I said that, when I mentioned that we really need to do everything, we really do, because I don't think there is a silver bullet solution. What can we do in the direct air carbon capture space? I think all of this has its place in different percentages on how we decarbonize not only ourselves, but really thinking holistically for the airline industry. But I'm very hopeful. I think that future iterations of SAF are going to come online faster than any of us anticipated, and that it's really up to the industry as a whole to work together. And what I mean by that, can the future fuels then be utilized by current existing aircraft, which is also a carbon play? You don't need to buy a whole new aircraft and don't need to make a new one to put it into service. That's the solution. What is the pathway of least resistance to help decarbonize is what we also need to think about.
So people in our audience, if they want to start a new business now, SAF is a good business to enter. Long-term, all kind of other things. And I'm sure that you already mentioned that SAF, for instance, it's attainable also for SMEs, right?
For sure.
As low as a 5,000 investment, so you can contribute even though you're small.
Yeah.
Steve, anything on the horizon that you're excited about or would love to see happen in our industry?
I think that all the SAF stuff is super exciting, but I think it's also exciting to look at the end-to-end, the full opportunity that exists for a trip, of which air is, obviously a huge contributing factor of our footprint, and doing everything we can to minimize that. But, looking, like we said earlier, about locally sourced ingredients. We went to dinner last night. Did you know it was a locally sourced restaurant? This is one of the things that I now look for, right? I think I'm excited, our company is excited to understand what are all those other opportunities, in addition to just lodging and air, that travelers can start to make change towards to make their trips more sustainable. You know, I think there's a lot of suppliers out there that have products that are really uniquely differentiating themselves, right? The lodging and the restaurant space, and certainly. So if we can tap into that, if we can start to move the needle by leveraging all of those different opportunities where all the suppliers and all the stakeholders come together, I think we can really make an impact.
You really believe that technology can make the difference and bring all that information in a way that it reaches the person?
I think we have to. Yeah, I think, you know, innovators, kind of tech innovators like Tripkicks and others out there, what we're trying to do is literally connect all of that together, play well with everybody, have connections with all the different partners and stakeholders in that space so that we can bring them together and equip and empower the traveler with all that information.
We're coming close to the end of our amazing conversation. Really loved it, but let's look in the mirror for a second and be honest, right? We talk about sustainability, everybody's talking about it. Are we all just jumping on the sustainability chatter bandwagon? And are we maybe at some point growing tired of the conversation before real change happen, or are you really optimistic?
We don't think so. Very optimistic, and so optimistic so that sustainability is a key pillar to what Delta is now. There's operational performance, on time, safety, cleanliness, but sustainability is right there with all of them. And so I really don't, this is not a topic anymore. It's a core pillar. And that's the key takeaway, is that this is not just some fly-by-night topic that just gets talked about. This is something that's ingrained into our culture now. We have over 155 sellers that are trained on this. We have corporate accounts calling on us daily to learn more about it. And it's just only going to intensify and increase. And I'm just really excited about the future, and not only just for Delta, but what's going to happen in the industry because this is not something we just should do. It's something we have to do to maintain business continuity. It's beyond just the airlines, how that impacts agency, OBT, and the tools that support us. So really excited about the future on it.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have to do something now, right? I think in the future, there's going to be even more lucrative opportunities, right? And there's going to be other solutions that maybe are even more impactful. But does that mean we just do nothing today and we continue to, you know, have a footprint that we don't even understand the total output of? No, we have to act now, right? And we have to be more educated. I mean, there's lots of data out there around travel programs and education for travel managers around what does a sustainable travel program really even look like? Right, so now's the time. Now's the time where we should be educating and doing everything that we can to start setting that framework so that in the future, when we have even greater solutions, we're ready, we're prepared, and we can execute upon them.
You guys are clear advocates for more sustainable travel. Do you make those choices yourself too? You mentioned like locally sourced food when you go to a restaurant, or what kind of other choices do you make?
Mine are little. So mine are all about, like, you know, understanding how these little things make a difference. I mentioned the restaurant one, locally sourced. I actually turn my air down in the room when I leave, which I never would have done in the past, but little things like that make a difference. Trip stacking for us is a big deal, you know, but it's always been, you know, SME ourselves. Spend is always important, so I'm always trying to make the most of my trip and not have, you know, wasteful travel there. So yeah, it's important, and I think I learn more and more about little things that I can do, change to make a difference. You know. Yeah.
Well, are you a sustainable traveler?
If I don't do it, other people won't follow, and so you have to practice what you preach. And just growing up with it back in my hazelnut days, you know, it's a part of who I am, and I'm a New York City kid, and I don't know what I would do without public transportation. And it's just the little changes that I think the big takeaway is you don't have. The little changes can make a big difference too. So you know, between how do you get to work and what you're eating and what airline you fly with can make a big impact.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I think we're not done yet, but super appreciated both of you making time to share your insights, the exciting things that happen. Sure, lots of challenges still ahead, but if we work together, we can really make that change happen. So thank you for joining us. We will have another fireside chat on this topic November 30th with KLM Air France in Europe. So we're going to listen a little bit more what's happening in Europe. You mentioned that there's sometimes ahead of us in some certain things, so it'll be really interesting to listen to that, and we look forward to seeing you again on November 30th. Have a wonderful day.